This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 140. What's your website content saying behind your back? Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is September 17th, 2015. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder, the Content Marketing Podcast is live on iTunes and on Stitcher. So if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Last week, we responded to a listener request and talked about how our content marketing assets can power up our sales teams. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. This week, we're turning our attention to your website content, specifically to what that content might be saying behind your back. What? I don't know. Let's find out. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Well, if Instagram is an important part of your content marketing strategy, we have some very good news for you today. Instagram has opened up its advertising platform to all business users. Now, you may recall a few months ago, Instagram started rolling out their ads function, as we knew would happen. And they started by rolling it out to a very select group of business users. Well, now that capacity is open up to everyone who has a business presence on Instagram. And they are making it easier for you to target your messages more effectively and to reach people based on what they care about. So click on over to Instagram and see about if that is part of your strategy. See about getting those ads set up. Facebook is making business pages more mobile friendly. So it's no secret that mobile is taking over the web, especially the social web, and Facebook is responding by making business pages a little bit more mobile friendly, a little bit easier to interact with when we're on those mobile devices. Among the improvements are larger, more prominent call to action buttons, and also some new sections for pages. For example, you can have a shop section that talks about your products, or you can have a services section that talks about services. Now, I have not seen, I went over to my own page and I did not see those options available, so I don't know if those are coming down the road or what the deal is, but the other improvements are definitely there, and they are making information on your page easy to find without a lot of scrolling and clicking around. So good news from Facebook. Periscope has also had an announcement this week. They now allow for landscape broadcasting. So up until now, Periscope only allowed for portrait formatted, which is the straight up and down orientation on your broadcast. But in the latest iOS, iPhone, and Android update, it now allows for landscape broadcasting for a more, if you will, cinematic look to your broadcasts. So good news for all you broadcasters who are on Periscope. Okay, our content hit of the week. Love this article. It's called 4 Apps That Can Make You a Better Writer. And this is by Kaylee Moore over on the Entrepreneur website. Now, y'all know I love me some good tools. You know, I'm a little bit of a techie. And in this article, Kaylee shares some really good tools, some of which I never heard of. My favorite that I'm going to totally start using is one called Hemingway. And it is designed to help you simplify your writing and really start writing in strong, simple sentences. And so it's, you know, you paste in the content that you have, and then it highlights different ways that you could improve it. You know, this sentence could be shorter, or this could be broken up into 2 sentences, et cetera, et cetera. It's really pretty cool, and it's a free tool. So, I recommend you check that out. And she highlights 3 other very good tools as well. So I highly recommend this post for my content creating colleagues, and I will give you the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. What's your website content saying behind your back? You know, I've heard it said that website content is like sausage. If you enjoy it, don't ask how it's made. I'm inclined to agree with that assessment. And you know, in my 20 odd years as a writer and a content specialist, I've seen pretty much every possible approach to creating website content, from, you know, copy pasting entire brochures to stealing other people's content. Was not involved in that myself, but I have seen it done. And I've also seen the extreme of teams being so obsessive about getting everything perfect that the site never launches, or the site takes a year to launch, and by then, you know, technology and their audience preferences have changed. So I've pretty much seen it all. And in my time, I have to say I've seen more than my share of mistakes. Some small and some large. And when I say mistakes, I don't mean a glaring typo in the header to your page, although those can certainly happen, and it's amazing, you know, what gets passed when you're proofreading at 3 a.m. so that the site can go live at 5. Another story for another day. But no, I'm talking about mistakes in the approach to the content itself. Mistakes that can give readers and give audiences the wrong impression about you. And truth be told, your website content is talking behind your back. No matter how good or how poor it is giving those audiences an impression of you. And if you are making certain errors with your content, consciously or unconsciously, you're giving them certain impressions about you that you might not consciously want them to have. So I'm going to go through 3 of those mistakes right now and just go through a little bit of the impression that these misguided approaches can make on your audience. The first mistake, which I have seen all the time, which is copy pasting the entire brochure content onto your website. So literally copy paragraph by paragraph from your brochure, find a page on the website to stick it on, paste it in, and call it done. And I have seen this so many times. I've seen it not so much when I was working for an agency, but I'll see it a lot of times when, you know, people will approach me about doing content for their website, and then when they see my prices, some of them say, "Oh, that's okay, I'll do it myself." And then I see their website a couple of months later, and it's literally copied and pasted brochure content. The problem with that is, it doesn't take into account the fact that we take in content online very differently from the way we take it in print. You know, in print, if you pick up a brochure, we tend to read brochures the way we read books. You know, you look at the cover, look at page 1, look at page 2, look at page 3, etc., etc. When we take in content online, we tend to scan. We tend to scan to look for basically to see if this content is worth reading. And we look for certain clues to that. And brochure content is not necessarily scannable. You know, if you have a lot of dense paragraphs and longer words, longer sentences, those are not necessarily conducive to appealing to an online audience. So if you dump your brochure content onto your website, what is that saying about you behind your back? One thing it might say about you is that we're lazy. You know, we had some good content and we had a website that needed content, bada bing, bada boom. Next thing you know, you got your fully functioning website. It also says that we don't understand how people read content online, and we don't care. You know, there's a certain sense of, you know, you didn't put any thought into this website. You just slapped this content up there because you had already written it for your brochure, and now you're going to sit back and let that website drive business for you, or not, as the case may be. But, you know, that could be the impression that it's leaving audiences with, that you're lazy, you don't really understand how people read content online, you don't really care how people read content online, you just wanted to get this website up and get done with it. not necessarily the kind of impression you want to be creating. The second mistake I want to talk about that a lot of brands go there is overloading visitors with information. There are so many websites out there that are just bloated with information about every detail, about every product and every service that you provide, and the technology behind it and the thinking behind it, and blah 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 blah. And the problem with this is that it's like when you go to a networking event and you walk up to someone at let's say at the coffee table, and you start up a conversation. You say, well, tell me about your business. And this person just starts to launch into a laundry list of everything that they provide. They want to tell you the technology behind it. They want to tell you why it's amazing. They want to tell you why they're the only ones that are doing this, about the big name clients that they've done this for, blah, 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 blah. And it's just overwhelming. When that happens to me at networking events, I start looking for the exit, or the, excuse myself to go talk with someone, pretend I recognize someone across the room. That always works really well. Oh, I see somebody got to check in with. Thanks for chatting. See you later. Bye. And there's the tendency to want to just, pardon the expression, but just barf up everything that we have to say about our products and services. And what that says to online audiences is that we are really fascinated with ourselves. We find what we do so intriguing that we not only have to tell you everything that we do, but we have to go into painstaking detail and lovingly describe everything about it. And, it kind of reminds me of a boss I once had. You would go to her desk, and she had pictures on her desk. She had pictures from her wedding and, a couple other things. And the pictures were all only of herself, including her wedding pictures. I never asked her, but I was also always so tempted to ask, was there another person involved in this wedding, or did you marry yourself? Because we all know you could totally do that. But it's like that. It's a certain conceitedness. It tells people that we're all about the things that we want to sell you. We're not really interested in you, not really interested in your problems. We just want to pick up the bullhorn and tell you everything that there is to know about us. So overloading visitors with information would not necessarily create the kind of impression that you want to convey. The third and final mistake I want to talk about is when brands, when their websites are full of content that they wrote for themselves. And by what I mean by that is they speak in their own language. They have their own shorthand, their own jargon, their own acronyms. And I will say it's really hard when you are so immersed in in your area of expertise. It's really challenging to step back and see it from a customer's point of view. That's why it can be really beneficial to bring in a third party to work on your website content, because they do have that outside objective perspective on everything. I've written a lot of content for healthcare clients, and I remember distinctly I was having a conversation with a very well-known heart surgeon, and this heart surgeon had come up with a new technique for surgery to remove heart tumors. And so we're talking about this surgery, and, we do this, we do that. And he got to a certain point, and he said, we excise the heart. I said, you do what? He said, we excise the heart. I said, oh, you take it out. He said, no, we excise it. I said, okay, what happens when you excise it? And he went through we do this, we do that, and then we lift it up out of the chest cavity. I said, okay, so you take it out. And it actually turned into kind of a comical conversation as we figured out the best way to talk about this procedure, because the word excise is not in the average person's day-to-day vocabulary. It's just not a word. It's not a word I use on a daily basis. Maybe it is for you, but when brands create content that's written for themselves, it's written from that inside the box perspective. And when I say inside the box, I mean within their own area of expertise and for their own peers. And what that says about you, and I hate to say this because I know that you're all good people and have good intentions, but when the content is written when the company writes the brand for itself and from its own point of view, what it says about you is basically, I'm a pompous twit who has no time for people who aren't as smart as I am. Okay? I hate to put it that bluntly, but it's true. You're implying that, well, hey, Mr. Reader or Ms. Audience, audience member, if you don't get what I'm trying to say, then I really don't care about having you as a customer. Again, totally unintentional, but that's the impression that a lot of people can walk away with. So we want to be careful of content that is written for ourselves and from our own points of view. So those are the three main mistakes that I see in the approach to content and the impressions that they can leave with people who interact with it. Now, I used a little bit of exaggeration, of course, but my point is this: your content could be your content is talking about you behind your back, and you might not like what it's saying. So how do we find out what that content is saying behind our backs? Stay tuned for our tip of the week, and I will tell you. But so that is my take on what your website content is saying behind your back. If you have any questions or want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will give that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. So we just talked about what your website content is saying behind your back, and we closed with the question, well, how do we find out? How do we find out the impression that our content is making on our audience? And there's a simple way to do that. You test it with people outside your company. It's not something we really think about. We review it internally. We know our best practices for online content. We get the requisite approvals, and we figure it's ready to go. But it can actually be tremendously valuable to show that content to someone who, for one reason or another, represents your target audience. And I will never forget the marketer who said, if my mama can't understand it, it doesn't belong on my website. And she actually did. She showed every piece of website content to her mom before it went up and got her mother's feedback. And that is so true. We need to make sure that it makes sense, that it makes sense to the people we're trying to speak to. So how do we test this content? Recruit some testers, people who represent your target audience. This could be family members, could be friends, could be colleagues, former coworkers, people in your online communities. Find some testers and get their feedback before your content goes live. And if you want to get really serious about it, there are a lot of research companies that will be happy to do some formal audience testing for you so that you can have some hard data behind what you're looking for. But if you go the less formal route, some questions to ask are, for example, what's your first impression of this content? What impression does this content give you about the brand behind it? Does this content represent what you look for in, and then the name of your industry? Does it represent what you look for in a law firm, in a doctor's practice, in a dog grooming company, etc.? Another important question, does it make you want to do business with this company? It may leave them saying, well, I'm really impressed with all their accolades, but it doesn't necessarily make me want to do business with them. So get your content outside the walls of your company, test it with some folks, and you might be very surprised at what you learn. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. Just yesterday, we had a special teleclass on this same topic. It was called Help, My Website Content Sucks. And if you happen to miss it, I will say the reaction has been so outstanding that we're planning to do a replay. And that replay is going to take place next Wednesday, September 23rd at 12 p.m. U.S. Central Time. Now, I don't have the registration link yet, but if you keep up with me on Twitter, we're going to share it across social media, but especially on Twitter. And we are on Twitter at Resonance CONT. That's Resonance Content with the ENT lopped off. We will be putting the URL out here shortly, so be on the lookout for that. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Zig Ziglar. He once said, quote, "Confidence is going after Moby Dick in a rowboat and taking the tartar sauce with you," unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.